We are going to start our webinar. It looks like we have a few more people trickling on, but I would love to introduce our host and presenter for today, Linda Cooper-Smith. Linda has been a CMIT owner for 15 years and has spent her career being an IT consultant, an IT translator, and an advisor for businesses. She lives in Stamford, Connecticut, and she's an expert in working remotely and helping other businesses work remote. In today's webinar, a part of the CMIT Solutions webinar series, we'll be discussing implementing password policies for your company. And with that, Linda, I'll pass it to you.
Hey, Alex, thank you so much. I hope everybody's doing good. It's getting a little bit warmer outside, I think, no matter what part of the country that you're in. As I look at my picture here, I'm like, damn, I still haven't gotten to the hairdresser yet. You know, I think I'll be able to do that in the short soon. So I hope everybody is healthy and safe out there. Certainly a lot going on as we continue to be able to operate from home. But working from home doesn't mean that we don't stop, you know, thinking about technology and being able to manage really thousands and thousands of computers that we end up doing. So as Alex said, my name is Linda Cooper-Smith. I'm actually a CMIT owner for, 15 years now. I own and operate, two areas, Stamford and Hartford in Connecticut. So that's that little part of Connecticut that sticks into New York. And we're really focused, as all of the CMIT folks are, on being able to make our clients as productive as possible. And one of the things that really frustrates us is when we have to be able to jump in and there's a fire going on because there's something that could have been prevented. And these days, there is so much that ends up stemming around password hygiene. So just as we need to be able to wash our hands and keep masks on and be vigilant about being able to, catch things from a person-to-person basis, from a machine-to-machine basis, we have to be just as vigilant to be able to make sure that our machines stay clean. And password hygiene is really a big critical component of that. So over the course of the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to walk you through implementing a password policy. Because when it comes to security, it's not just about being able to do the things that you look at your IT provider to do, but it's also about being able to really educate your people. And these days, educating them, as one of our vendors so famously says, the last line of defense is what is happening between the keyboard and the chair. And so that's your employees, and being able to give them some proper guidance and implementing the safeguards that you can are one of the real key things. And that's what I'll be talking about today, is how do you actually go through and do this? So first of all, let's cover some of kind of the basics here. Why do you need a password policy? Doesn't everybody know what makes up a good password policy? And this has been very, very interesting. As I go around and I ask people, so what do you think is a good password policy? What do you think that, where's a good place to leave your passwords? I get some really surprising answers. So there's a real need, again, to be able to just educate. Passwords take up time. They're annoying. They're frustrating. When you're sitting there trying to be able to get something done and you type in your username and you type in what you think your password is and you get password or username is invalid. And if you can't figure it out after a couple of attempts, your account locks, or you now have to be able to go through the whole rigmarole having to do with the forgot password. So a lot of ways, I don't know of too many people that love passwords, but they are a necessary evil, and they are the way that we access important information and get behind, important and get to important information. So every time that we're looking to be able to do something in the internet, we want to be able to open up our phone, we want to be able to connect a new Alexa or something in our home, we're challenged with this thing called a password. So you may have heard us talk and compare accounts and a lot of things in regards to technology with a house. Well, here again, that technology really helps us to be able to kind of get everybody to visualize this. When you need to get into your house, you need a key. And when you need to get into an account, and be that an account that's on your desktop or something that you access through a browser, you need a password. So that password is just like a key. Just like your house has lots of important information, that account has lots of important information. And the reason that you put a lock on your house and you put a password on an account is so that not just everybody can walk into your house and create, mischief, or even things that are much more dangerous. And in that same exact way, it's important that that password be strong enough to be able to do it. So some of the things that you wouldn't do with your house is, so you have a house, you have a car, you may have a garage, you may have a vacation home, you may have a lock that you bring to the gym. All of those things have different keys, different combinations. So would you use one key to be able to access all of those things? No. And so that's kind of a hint to what you shouldn't do with a password either, is be able to use the same one over and over and over again. So your passwords are your keys to the kingdom, as I call it. And the kingdom here is your electronic world. It is the things that are running on your desktop. There are things that are running through a browser. There is some system that you log on to, but those passwords really are the key to the kingdom. One of the big reasons that we're doing this and kind of focusing on passwords is an astounding statistic. 80% of hacking-related breaches originate with a password compromise. In the last 2 weeks alone, we've worked with 3 different organizations that have had a password breach that all of a sudden the fire alarms had to be able to go off and we had to be able to jump into action. So if we could simply do one thing, get everybody in the business world to take password management seriously, we could really stop the amount of money that's being made in terms of these hacking activities. So let me go through a little bit more convincing about, why this is so important. There are a lot of people who use very weak passwords. There's a great website out there called How Secure Is My Password? And it is astounding how, I type in a password and I find, it could be cracked in, 2 minutes. I usually don't use that one, but I had one, a client recently say to me, I want the password to be Healthy1 because that's part of our branding. This is what we do. And we threw it in and demonstrated to them that that password could be breached in all of about 3 seconds. Now, even if you get one of those passwords that says, it could be, broken by a computer in 42 minutes, which was what I did this morning to be able to say my first name and my date of birth. So a lot of people will use something like that to make it memorable. It took all of 42 minutes. And remember, we're not talking anymore that people, actual people like you and I with a face, are doing the password hacking. This is code that's being run. So there's a piece of code that's sitting there knocking on your firewall or the router at your home, and it's just trying lots of different combinations. Once all of a sudden it gets a successful combination, what happens now is that there's a known combination of a username and password. Your username and password actually now goes on to a dark web hacker queue where they can buy that combination. And that's when the real hacking will become. They will now start to be able to use that to use correlated information that you have as a part of all the different data breaches. So they know the Google account that you're using and the Hotlook account that you're using and your current employer, and maybe you're doing some nonprofit work. They know all those emails. And so if you're reusing a password, you will now start to be able to allow those hackers, those scripts, to be able to completely have the keys to your kingdom. And they're going to open up and come right in through the front door. So weak passwords, reuse of passwords, and then what is feeding all of this are these data breaches. Not a day goes by where we don't hear that somebody's system has been breached, information has been stolen. I did a quick search as a part of preparing for this, and the going rate right now, according to NBC News, and this goes back to 2018. I didn't, have a whole lot of time this morning. You can purchase a Social Security number for $2. And I bet you that's a whole lot less now. As a matter of fact, the entry point to be able to get into the hacking business, because that's what this is really low. So here's another example of what I found in preparing for this. Former consultant from the FBI, looking to be able to see what he could find, remote access Trojan, $200. And this is in the malware category. Password stealer, $50. So for $50, you can buy your way to be able to start stealing everybody's password out there. And so the numbers, the barrier, the amount of money that it takes to be able to get into hacking is really low right now. And you don't even have to be intelligent. You can just watch a YouTube video and 1, 2, 3, put yourself into this kind of a business. So passwords. So we need to be talking about, what to be able to do to stop these people from making literally trillions of dollars now. The cost and the expense or the estimations of what's being made in the dark web now exceed the amount of money that the drug cartels are making on a global basis. So this is today's crime. And passwords are really, as we saw in that statistic before, 80%. So if we can stop 80% of the password problems, that's going to put all of us in a much, much better kind of a way. So it starts with your employees. And you can't assume that they know what they need, what is a good password. So you're going to have to be able to educate them. And I got news for you, you're probably going to need to remind them. And that's one of the things we will talk about as well. So just like you have a company policy for anti-harassment, time off, safety, COVID rules, your company needs to be able to have a password policy. If there's only one IT policy you have, it should be an IT policy. And as we continue through here, we're going to tell you how to be able to do that. So when a password gets compromised, bad things happen. Your environment can be infected with ransomware, in which case you wake up, say, oh, you owe me, 2,000 Bitcoin. Current, I think the last time I looked at Bitcoin, it was trading for just under, $1,000, $10,000. So you're going to need to be able to do that. Downtime. A client recently asked me, so what really happens if something like this? What's the worst thing that can happen? I said, well, let's say your entire computer network and all of your computers are taken down for 2 weeks. What's the impact to your business? What happens if the most important cloud-based system that you store all of your information into goes down, or that they think that there's been some kind of activity in there and they shut your account down? So these are the new scenarios when we talk about disaster recovery and business continuity that we're talking about. It's no longer are we going to have a fire. There's a much higher probability that you're going to be attacked by ransomware or some other kind of significant malicious code than you are going to have a fire in your business. So how do you get your employees to take this seriously? Because, as we know with lots of other policies, you can tell your employees what they need to be able to do, but are they really going to follow it? Are they really going to believe it? So one of the things that you can do is you can get a copy of this recording. You can talk to your IT advisor about being able to educate your employees through the materials that are here at our website, white papers. We've got lots of stuff out there that can help you to be able to understand it. And getting them to understand and buying into password hygiene is important not just for the company, but for themselves, because they also have personal accounts and passwords, bank accounts, and all types of other things that they need to be protected. So the same policy that you have for your business is the same policy that somebody should be using in everyday life, because we have lots of things that we need to protect on a personal basis as well. So one of the questions that I kind of thought about and threw into some search engines, I'm not a legal, advisor, have no legal training, didn't even talk to a lawyer about this, but can you sue? Can an employer sue an employee? And I think as you go around educating, simply to be able to say that to your employees puts this into perspective. And so, what I found from a company called Wood Edwards LLP, so a great little plug for them, is typically an employee is not held liable for ordinary carelessness or negligence in the performance of their duties. However, if the employee acts outside the scope of reasonableness, causing damage or injury to either property or persons, the employer may be able to sue the employee for negligence. So I would say to you that making your employees aware that that is the consequences of them not following the policy may be just enough to be able to really motivate them to be able to do what needs to be done and protect your system, protect your business. So how do you go about doing this? Because it's not just one password. It's not just one door to the house anymore. The first thing you're going to need to be able to do is inventory your systems and your software. It's not just passwords. A lot of my clients think, oh, we've got a Windows, we've got a password policy implemented when we log on to the network. I'm like, What about your email system? What about your QuickBooks Online? What about the practice management system that is now in the cloud, or your legal, document management system? And so all of us have all of these different systems that we have. You go into an Adobe licensing account and you need an ID and a password. You go to your bank, you need an ID and a password. So as a business, you need to be inventorying all of these systems and software. So anything that has a username and a password, whether it's unique to the person or the ones that are shared, and you don't necessarily have the option of not sharing them between your employees, all of these at the very least need to be on an inventory list. And I got news for you. That inventory list from an IT management perspective is one of the absolute cornerstone pieces of documentation. As you put that together, commit, and that's one of your action items coming out of this besides, doing something about password hygiene, is sit down and create a catalog and a list of all of the different systems and software that you have. You'll need that for disaster recovery, for business continuity, for your budget, so lots and lots of different things. And of course, password hygiene. So the next step is being able to now create a written password policy. And so what I have on here on the left-hand column are the elements that you need to be considering when creating a password policy. How long should the password be? Today, I think most CMIT advisors would say minimum of 12 characters. Some people are advocating being able to do whole sentences. So the length of the password there be a minimum restriction, and you want to be able to say they can be even longer and more complex depending on the sensitivity of the information that password is allowing you entry to. Renewal. The password has to change. It can't stay the same. Why? Because every day we've got data breaches going on. So you think every day the system that you may be working on may have been breached, some piece of malicious code, an ugly thing called a keylogger will actually store the keystrokes that you're typing on your keyboard and zip them away out to the dark web. So you need to be changing them. They need to be complex, so it has to be a word and a number and a special symbol, and you kind of get the whole thing there. Reuse. Don't reuse the password that you used for the last X number of times. 2 times, 3 times, 5 times. Again, all depending on the sensitivity of the information that's unlocking dictates how rigorous you're going to do that. And then here's the big one that really starts to stump people is, where am I going to store my passwords? So let's get rid of a couple places that commonly people use to be able to store their passwords. Your browser. So when you open up Chrome or you open up, Firefox or Safari, it will very nicely say, should I save your password for you? The answer is no. That password is going to be kept in clear text right onto your machine. So all it takes is some darn piece of code to be able to go through there, start sniffing your hard drive, and let me tell you, they are looking for those passwords. So no, doing save in my browser, although easy and convenient, is not safe. Keeping it in a password-protected Excel sheet, also not good. Go back to those password crackers. Most of the time, the passwords that you're using on that sheet are simply not, and we've seen time and time again that those can be very easily hacked or be able to be written underneath because they're truly not, encrypted. So some people say, what about Keychain on a Mac? So Keychain is actually a safe place. However, that only works for your Apple devices. And so you may have other things that you use that are not Apple devices, and you may not have your accounts all set up to be able to share. And then you have things that don't operate on your Apple device. So where do you put, the password for your bank and those types of things? So that's also not a great place. So a lot of us at this point advocate being able to use a password manager, so something like LastPass. There's a couple others that are out there very good. And so that in an upcoming webinar, we're actually also going to be talking about how to be able to use, a password vault. If you've got people that are unsophisticated and just can't handle anything complex, very honestly, you are safer to be able to keep it on a piece of paper. And, have some kind of a way of being able to duplicate it so that, it doesn't get torn and shredded. So you do, as an organization, really have to think strongly about what are the company-approved places, and your CMIT advisor can help you to be able to identify what are the places that you can offer your employees to store those important passwords. So moving through the rest of the requirements on the password policy, there's also sharing. So you want to let people know that it is not allowed that you share your personal password with somebody else. And if we do have to share a password because multiple people use the same account, this is how we do that. MFA, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication is also something that should be absolutely mandated at this time. And we'll talk about that a little bit further down the road. It needs to be a written policy. It needs to be reviewed on a yearly basis because the landscape and everything having to do with technology and passwords and cybersecurity change. So once a year, you want to be able to pull up that policy, review it, work with your IT advisor to be able to say, is there anything else we should be thinking about in regards to this? And you also need to put that policy back into the hands of your employees and get them to review it and renew it. Because just because you put a policy out there once does not mean that they're going to remember it or they're going to take it seriously. So you do need to be able to bring this topic up, and I would recommend once a year. What we do in our office is we as a team do a little bit of a lunch and learn. We bring up the policy. We make sure we kind of look at it and say, okay, is this possible, or, where do we maybe have some holes? I give the staff, and that's, my technical staff I'm not so worried about, but they also come up with some really good questions and thoughts. But the administrative staff is just certainly not that kind of tuned into these things. And so needing to be able to do that renewal. And so here's another, best practice. When it comes to company policies, don't just think that you can email it out and say, okay, this is what everybody needs to do. If you're serious about that policy, you need to be able to have some kind of a face-to-face dialogue about the policy. You cannot assume that people are going to read it and do the right thing. So make it fun, make it into a lunch and learn, and just begin to make that as a part of your overall culture. We also require that as an employee starts with us and on a yearly basis, they sign not only our password policy, but a number of other policies that are very important, and then they need to be able to make sure that they're really operating with that. So you can also reach out to your CMIT advisor to be able to get a sample of a password policy, because let's face it, it's so much easier to be able to just take something that somebody else has created and then modify it for your company. So your CMIT advisor can certainly, provide you a template, and you can just go off on your own, because at the end of the day, I don't want to make money on a password policy. I just want you to be safe, and that's really what, the spirit of all of this is. So now that you've got that inventory of systems and you've got a policy about how your passwords should be handled, you now need to be able to go about implementing those rules, those password rules, into as many of your electronic systems as you can. So that's where that list comes in. And CMIT can help you here as well. Very often it is your IT advisor that has the ability to be able to do those more administrative things, and they understand how the systems and where to be able to go in the navigation to be able to say the password should be this long. It should expire in this many days. The same password can't be reused this many times. Not all systems are going to have those capabilities. We're seeing more and more systems include the ability to be able to craft that password rule, but where they don't, you need to stress to your employees that just because the system doesn't force you to change it doesn't mean that you're not required to change it. The policy is that you change it. So whether the system reminds you or not, and if it doesn't, it's on you, the employee, to make sure that it is renewed, whatever it is in accordance with the policy. Create yourself an Outlook reminder so that you go in to be able to do that. But again, you need to be able to shift this responsibility into the employee's hands when it comes to being able to just make sure that it's actually getting done. MFA, as I said, multi-factor authentication, so multi is the key word in that phrase, meaning we're asking for more than one thing to say that you are who you are. So the concept of a username and a password is that the password is known to whatever server or system is going there. And we're now saying that you are saying that you are who you are by giving them the password. But because of all these password breaches and ways that they've found to be able to go around this, asking for a second piece of information. So it's something that's known about you and something that you have are the two parts to that multi-factor authentication. We saw this first being broadly used within the banking industry, as the banking industry very much was losing money and all kinds of, mayhem was happening, because of passwords. They now want to be able to give you that second factor, or you have a known, computer, or they're going to send you a verification code to your phone, or they're going to call you and you have to verify something. So it's all two things in order to be able to get into it. That is the most secure way. One can argue that there may be ways around that, and I wouldn't say to you that a year from now that we don't have yet another, kind of a new cyber threat to work around. But today, being able to have that password policy that includes having a second way of authenticating you, especially for those critical accounts, is the most important, most effective way of being able to get these things done. Again, educate your folks, remind them on an annual basis. When you have these kind of, face-to-face meetings, leave time for questions. And we've got time for questions on the end of this as well. Make sure to let them know what are safe places and what are not safe places. And if you are going to implement a password vault, don't just throw it at them. You're going to need to understand that you're going to need to give them some training tools, whether that's a video, whether that's somebody to go to that says, hey, how do I do this, or remind me how to do this. You need to provide that. Recently, it's one of the things that came up within our team is we said, there's a lot of people that call our help desk, and one of the great services that we offer is you can call us up for how do I do this? So I've had people call up and say, how do I do a mail merge in Word? And the help desk will lead you through that. in these cases, we're not doing something that you, the user, couldn't do yourself, but we simply have more knowledge than you, so you're able to leverage that. However, employers need to start thinking about, do your employees really have enough computer skills and enough computer knowledge to be able to take care of the machine? So I think in today's world, everybody just assumes you know everything about Windows. Or even the other day, I had some users call up and they couldn't find the Launchpad in Mac. So if you're a Mac person, you'll know what that means. But they didn't know that. So the employer just assumed because they're a person underneath the age of 40 that you could hand them a MacBook and they automatically know where everything is. Not so. So training is something that you just can't assume. So think about and make sure that your people have the training and the education to work effectively. You'll also get a lot more productivity out of them as well. So the very last part of this is you've now done all of this. You've inventoried your systems. You've come up with a password policy. You've enforced it in all of the different systems that you have. You've launched, an annual process to be able to make sure that everybody does it, and people still don't follow the policy. Educate them again. Have a face-to-face conversation. If you are in violation of a policy, just like you are in violation of anti-harassment, what do you do? So your HR consultant will tell you that you have a conversation with that person. You give them a written warning. You then, for a lot of us as managers, it's a three-step process. We find you do this once, twice, thrice, and we're now talking about having to be able to dismiss you. And don't think that you also can't let them know that we are now bordering on something that somebody can consider gross negligence. And gross negligence has serious consequences to you personally. So hopefully that'll get them to be able to understand the need of that and be able to get them back in line. Otherwise, you've got a different kind of a problem that you need to be able to address. So before I take questions, the quick recap is inventory your systems, come up with a password policy, educate your people about that password policy, letting them know that it's the policy that rules, even when the systems can't enforce those overall rules. And then do this process on an annual basis to keep things fresh. So at this point, that's the end of the materials that I have prepared. And I'd like to see if there's any questions out there or even any other comments and thoughts, because it's great to be able to get some feedback on all of this. So Alex, do we have anything in the queue?
Hi, Linda. Thanks again for sharing all of that information. It was very helpful. First question is, and you've had spent your whole career with businesses and helping them develop IT policies. So over the past 5 to 10 years, how have things in the ecosystem changed? What maybe you were doing 5 years ago that is no longer best practice now?
So some of those things are, so if I think back to where I've heard people keeping passwords, is sometimes I've heard them keeping in their Outlook contacts. So we kind of think that Outlook is secure. It's this, great Microsoft thing. But I can let you know that we use tools to be able to extract and export information out of somebody's PST or OST file, which is the file that Outlook keeps all of that information for. And if I can pull that information out to be able to restore it, that means I also have access to the passwords that you've buried inside of that. So at one time, everybody thought that that was a good place, and I had mine there for a time. But it's no longer, a good place. Another one was that password-protected Word or Excel sheet. For a lot of times, you're saying, okay, it would take it would take an inordinate amount of time for somebody to figure it out, and if you don't have it, you can't get in. That's just not the case anymore. So that, safe storage area has also, moved away.
Thanks, Linda. So after all the information that you gave us, today. If you're a business owner, what are my next steps now? I've learned a little bit about passwords, but how do I truly protect my business?
Yeah. So you sit down, even right after this meeting, and create that list of systems. The systems become the devices generically that we log on to. So it's your laptop, it's your desktop, it's your phone, it's all of those different websites that you go to. So there's usually a pretty even correlation between developing that inventory list and being able to develop all the different places that you're going to have to work through from a password basis. That next step is either pull up somebody's password policy that you may have access to, pull something up on the internet, or contact your CMIT advisor to be able to get a sample of that policy. And, put an appointment, in your book to be able to say, okay, I'm going to spend an hour, and it's not really going to take more than that to be able to start carving this up and being able to then put an action plan behind it. You don't need a lot of money to be able to have a password policy. Even if we go to being able to go to a password vault, they're really inexpensive. So I know that, a lot of organizations may not have extra money in their budgets, but doing a password policy is a really inexpensive, thing. It's a small investment of time that is going to pay you back tremendously so that you're not one of those 80% of a breach where a password is the reason for that.
Excellent. So Linda, you spoke briefly on the dark web and passwords for sale. Is there any way to know if my passwords are for sale on the dark web?
There is increasingly, we are seeing paid-for services that you can go in and put in an email address, your social security number, other kinds of personal information, and find out whether that information is being actively sold in the dark web. CMIT very often, any of the offices have that included within their plans. We have things called dark web scan reports that will list out every single email address and password that has been found in those breaches, as well as the ability to be able to put in your personal Gmail account or Hotmail account to be able to see whether that was part of a breach as well. I recently had a client who was kind of like, but I change my passwords, all the time. What's the importance of doing this? And we pulled up the report, and a brand new employee that they hired in the previous week already had used their work email address and password to create an Evite as a part of a marketing event that they were on. And sure enough, that week, Evite was breached. So new employee, they're all of like 5 days, and already there was a password that had been found. And if they're reusing passwords, it's going right across the stage.
Well, thank you, Linda. I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This webinar will be available via recording. If you are looking for additional information, please reach out to your local CMIT advisor or visit cmitsolutions.com. Thanks again, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Alex. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.